celebration of our veterans. Tonight's event is presented through the combined efforts of Payson Junior High School's art, band, orchestra, and choir departments. We appreciate the generosity of Payson High School, the Fine Arts Department, and the custodians who have allowed us to use their facility and equipment. To our veterans here this evening, we offer our special welcome and our heartfelt thanks. We hope to recognize and honor your sacrifices in the past and also your presence with us here tonight. The overture to our show this evening was a video compilation of photos. We hope that you recognized a few of the faces in that video. They're just a few of the many veterans who live among us as family, friends, neighbors, and church fellows. It is because of them that the American dream of freedom and opportunity goes on and on. Tonight, it's all about thanks.
My family and I lived in Germany 5 years while I taught school for Department of Defense. We were there in 2004, traveled with the school group to Bastogne, Belgium, to participate in the 60th year commemoration of the Battle of the Bulge. In Bastogne, 1944, amid freezing wind and blurring snow, General McAuliffe was given an ultimatum by the surrounding German troops to surrender or be annihilated. The general's reply, now famous, was simply nuts. The troops there defending the city were eventually bolstered by Patton's Third Army, but the battle raged nearly 6 weeks and cost thousands of lives on all sides. The day of this commemoration was cold and snowy. As we walked through the town square amid hundreds of World War II veterans and those of us honoring them, my musical ears picked up the strains of our national anthem being sung by someone with a heavy French accent. I pushed through the crowd to see an elderly French gentleman, fully dressed in military uniform, with his hand over his heart, singing to an American vet who had apparently just happened to pass by. It was a moment of tremendous reverence. Soldier to soldier, a gesture of thanks for sacrifice made 60 years before. Most of us watching wept at the scene. We onlookers could only imagine the horror of the memories, the cold, the fear, the unknown outcome, and the loneliness of being so far away from home. Before the song was over, I realized the Frenchman's hand, that right hand over his heart, was missing several fingers.
Those of you who are veterans or are currently serving in the military may salute the flag as the Payson Junior High Band now plays the Star Spangled Banner. Would you please join with me as we sing the first verse? tonight's color guard from the Air Force ROTC as they have presented our nation's flag to us. Would you please join with me as we now repeat the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. The Air Force ROTC students this evening are Rachel Picatis, Mike McCleve, and Mitchell Riley. We appreciate them coming so far from Provo to celebrate with us this evening. You may be seated. War I, known at the time as the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, in the Palace of Versailles, outside of the town of Versailles, France. However, fighting had ceased seven months earlier when the armistice between the Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. For that reason, November 11th, 1918 is generally regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. In November 1919, President Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day with the following words. To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride in the freedom of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing which has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy and justice in the councils of the nations. At Payson Junior High, we are proud to honor our military each year with this Veterans Day concert. You may be aware that a state-of-the-art veterans nursing home has recently been opened in Payson. Statistics gathered in conjunction with that project number of veterans in our area at nearly 46,000. We invite you to consider each of them and countless others who have already passed on as the concert band now plays Anthem of Liberty.
I'm fortunate to have three important men in my life who have left their homes and families to serve their country in the fight for freedom. First, my husband, Daniel. He is a Vietnam War era veteran who served for 3 years as one of the final group of young men called up for this difficult war. He came home after 3 long years and then served for several years in the National Guard. My father, Endel Terry, who was born and raised in Estonia, a tiny country in Northern Europe, fought valiantly for freedom. First, as it was overtaken by Germany in 1939, and then a year later, as it was occupied by Russia. He was severely wounded in battle, and by a miracle was rescued from the battlefield where he had been left for dead. Many years later, he was awarded the Estonian Purple Heart for his bravery and valor during World War II. My father-in-law, Richard C. Bowles, served in the United States Army also during World War II. He was part of a ground artillery unit and fought in the Battle of the Bulge, which was a significant battle of that war. Both my father and father-in-law never really spoke of their war experiences. They had seen the ravages of war, and I guess they decided that they would not dwell on that, and they chose to live their lives in the preservation of freedom by being responsible citizens, by raising responsible families, and doing all that they could to help those in need. I am so grateful for these 3 dear men, and all men and women who have left their homes and families to answer freedom's call. I am so grateful to be an American, to have the privilege of living in this land of hope and this land of dreams, and the home to all who share the dream of freedom.
So
Junior High Choir, and also thank you for the advanced percussionists for demonstrating the creative genius of a drummer. I'm sure most of those parents are very glad that they're now beating on a garbage can and not their pots and pans and their tabletops any longer. We now turn your attention back to the 1940s for the big band sounds that inspired a whole generation. Tonight, the Payson Junior High School Jazz Band will be conducted by Army National Guard veteran Boyd Erickson. Mr. Erickson is also a veteran band director and the very helpful husband of the band director of Payson Junior High School, Connie Erickson. The jazz acknowledges the help of this year of several high school musicians who, like all of our veterans here tonight, instruct and inspire. The beginning band at Payson Junior High actually meets in 3 different class periods, divided into percussion, brass, and woodwinds. Once or twice a term, the separate classes combine to practice pieces for concert. This year's group is well balanced and reportedly well behaved. The first song that they will play for us is actually several songs put together in a musical form called a medley. The second song from the beginning band is reminiscent of artillery fire and is simply called Barrage.
You know, one thing that influenced my love of this country is the example of my dad. His name's Dean Bristow, and he recently retired as a physician here in the Payson community. And one way that Dad showed that love for his country was through his service as a military member in the Air Force in several different capacities throughout my life. Dad's a graduate of the Air Force Academy, and he's also served as a pilot in Vietnam, and then later as an Air National Guard flight surgeon. And then before he retired, he was a commander at several hospitals and finished his career as a full bird colonel. Dad always wanted to fly, and when he was really young, at the end of World War II, he would watch these dogfights that were staged over a military base near his home, and that inspired his desire to learn to fly and be a pilot. He dreamed of going to West Point or Annapolis and then someday commanding a jet fighter squadron. But he knew there were a lot of obstacles in his way. But one thing he could do is get good grades, so he worked really hard in school. He said even in art class he worked hard so that he could qualify to be chosen for one of these military academies. And then while he was still in high school, they announced the formation of the Air Force Academy in Colorado. So he decided to apply there, and he was accepted as one of 22 applicants from California to be a member of the second graduating class of the Air Force Academy. And so he finally got to realize his dream of flying. And he served our country for several years in that capacity as a pilot and a navigator for our country. Later he decided to become a doctor, but he was still involved in the military by joining the Air National Guard, and he was a flight surgeon for many years while I was growing up. And also re-enlisted later on during Desert Storm and served as a commander at several hospitals. Dad, I want to thank you for your service to our country. I know that the sacrifice that you've made during your life has preserved the freedoms that my children enjoy, and I want to say thank you for that. One of the pieces that I will play tonight kind of captures the dream that you had of flying that you described to me when you were a young boy. And so I hope you enjoy our song, Free Flight.
locomotive chase is based on an event which took place during the Civil War. In the early years of the Civil War, Georgia was largely protected from military hostilities, leaving it free to ship arms and munitions, food and supplies to Confederate troops on the battlefields of the Northeast. It was the importance of the extensive railroad system to the Confederates that prompted James Andrews, a Union spy from Kentucky, to attempt a daring effort to disrupt the 128-mile rail line connecting Atlanta and Chattanooga. Along with 19 Union soldiers dressed as civilians, Andrews arrived at Marietta on April 12, 1862. Here they boarded a northbound train pulled by the General, a wood-burning locomotive. When the train stopped so that passengers and crew could eat breakfast, Andrews uncoupled the engine, a wood tender, and 3 box cars from the passenger cars. They then sped off with the goal of damaging as many tracks and rail bridges as possible. Hearing the General steam out, conductor William Fuller and 2 employees ran out of the hotel dining room and pursued the stolen train by foot for several miles. Ultimately, Fuller would commandeer the locomotive Texas, and joined by Confederate soldiers, would finally catch Andrews' raiders. All 20 Union soldiers were considered to be spies, since they were captured in civilian clothes behind enemy lines. A court-martial was convened, and the leader and 7 other men were condemned and executed. Of the remaining 14, 8 succeeded in making their escape from Atlanta, Georgia, and reaching the safety of the North. The other 6, who shared in this effort but were recaptured, remained as prisoners until they were exchanged for prisoners held by the Union. Ladies and gentlemen, please now enjoy the concert band performing the descriptive piece called The Great Locomotive Chase. Speaking of the Civil War, in just a few days, our nation will celebrate the 150th anniversary of President Lincoln's inspiring Gettysburg Address. Some critics of the time call the speech silly and flat, but a New York Times editor called it a fine gem. Recently, Governor Gary Herbert challenged all of Utah to learn and live President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address to celebrate its anniversary. On your program insert, you will find the words of the Gettysburg Address. Will you read with me and read it with me, remembering all of those soldiers who gave their lives that our nation might live? Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any other nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives, that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or retract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. I challenge all of us to become more acquainted and recite that more often, the Gettysburg Address. Would you join in us in honoring the veterans here tonight as we perform Armed Forces on Parade? If you are a veteran, please stand when your service song is played and allow us to present you with a token of our appreciation. This patriotic treat has been provided in part through the generosity of Payson Market and the very supportive owner and manager of Poor Boys Barbecue and Dogs. The advance band will now play Armed Forces on Parade. The United States Navy. current member of the military that did not get a token of our appreciation? Thank you.
From the time I was a little girl, I was very aware of my father's patriotism. His activity in the American Legion inspired my junior membership in the American Legion Auxiliary. Before I knew much about the hardships of war, I just thought it was fun to be a member and memorize the preamble that spoke of defending the Constitution and respecting veterans. I even served a year as the local Miss Poppy, giving my speech about the symbolism of the poppies we wear on Memorial and Veterans Day. I was a young teen before I understood that it was my dad's service in the Korean War that convinced him that America is indeed a haven from the violence and fear that prevail in many other parts of the world. My dad taught us flag etiquette, and we always had a flagpole in our front yard. He welded and erected the pole himself. My dad, Frank Matson, passed away in 2002. It was a hard time, and I miss my dad. But I thrilled at the military tribute he received from the veterans who are members of our local American Legion. I miss my father, but I've been very proud to be married to a member of the Utah National Guard. My husband, Boyd Erickson, served 20 years. My stepsons and a grandson have followed Boyd's example and served in the National Guard and in active Army. Our oldest son is a member of the Air Force ROTC at BYU. We'll commission next May. I'm happy that my personal life has been enriched by brave men who volunteer their efforts to the protection of our country and to the freedom of others throughout the world.
Just like Mrs. Erickson, I'm sure that each of us have loved ones whom we wish to honor and thank for their service. We hope that you have felt our thanks this evening. We are delighted that you've been here with us tonight. The combined groups will now take the stage and offer their finale number entitled Patriotic Salute. This piece is a medley, including many of our American favorite tunes. Some of those that you'll recognize will be Yankee Doodle, You're a Grand Old Flag, and even bits and pieces of Susan's Stars and Stripes Forever. The students have worked hard to prepare this show, and the combined students and faculty would like to show once again the veterans and let them know of their profound gratitude for your service and sacrifice.
I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy.
proud of them for their efforts this evening. Let's give them one more round of applause.